Marcus Thompson had never planned to end up on the streets. Just 18 months ago, he was a regular teenager attending Lincoln High School, dreaming of college and a better life. But when his mother lost her job and they couldn't pay rent, everything changed. The eviction notice came on a cold Tuesday morning, and by Friday, Marcus found himself sleeping in shelters and abandoned buildings. The city's east side was unforgiving. Here, survival meant making tough choices, and Marcus quickly learned that being alone made him vulnerable. The Crimson Wolves gang controlled these streets, and they offered protection in exchange for loyalty. At first, Marcus resisted. He remembered his mother's words about staying away from trouble, but hunger and fear have a way of breaking down even the strongest principles. Tommy. Snake Rodriguez was the first gang member to approach Marcus. Snake was only 22, but he carried himself like someone much older. His arms were covered in tattoos, and his eyes held the hardness that came from years on the streets. He found Marcus digging through a dumpster behind a fast food restaurant, looking for anything edible. "Hey, kid," Snake called out, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You look hungry." Marcus straightened up, wiping his dirty hands on his torn jeans. He was embarrassed to be caught like this, but his empty stomach had overruled his pride. "I'm fine," he mumbled, though they both knew it was a lie. Snake smiled and pulled a $20 bill from his pocket. "Buy yourself some real food, number. Strings attached." When Marcus hesitated, Snake added, "Look, I've been where you are, and nobody should have to eat garbage to survive." That simple act of kindness was the beginning of Marcus's downward spiral. Snake didn't pressure him right away. Instead, he would appear whenever Marcus was at his lowest point, offering food, a warm place to sleep, or just someone to talk to. Slowly, Snake introduced Marcus to other members of the Crimson Wolves. They became the family Marcus had lost. The gang's headquarters was an abandoned warehouse on Maple Street. Inside, they had created a makeshift home with old furniture stolen, electronics, and walls covered in graffiti. The older members treated Marcus like a little brother, teaching him the rules of the streets. They told him stories of their victories, their battles with rival gangs, and their dreams of getting rich and leaving the neighborhood behind. Marcus tried to ignore the illegal activities at first, told himself he was just there for the friendship and protection. But gradually, he was pulled deeper into their world. It started with small tasks, watching for police while others conducted business, delivering messages between different gang members, acting as a lookout during meetings. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was steady. Marcus learned to walk with the confident swagger of someone who belonged to something bigger than himself. He got his first tattoo, a small wolf on his wrist, and felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced since his mother died. 6 months after they were evicted, Snake became like an older brother to Marcus. He taught him how to fight, how to read people's intentions, and how to survive in a world where trust was a luxury few could afford. "The streets don't forgive weakness," Snake would say. "You have to be ready to protect yourself and your family." As weeks turned into months, Marcus found himself participating in more serious activities. He helped with drug deliveries, stood guard during territorial disputes, and even carried weapons for other gang members. Each step seemed small at the time, but together they were leading him down a path he never intended to travel. The Crimson Wolves had ongoing conflicts with several rival gangs, but their biggest enemy was the Royal Guards. Despite their name, the Royal Guards weren't actual guards or police officers. They were another street gang that controlled the north side of the city. The rivalry between the two groups went back years, involving disputes over territory, drug, sales, and respect. Marcus learned about the Royal Guards through stories told in hushed tones at the warehouse. The older gang members spoke of them with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. The Royal Guards were known for being disciplined and organized, almost military-like in their structure. They wore distinctive blue bandanas and had a reputation for being ruthless with anyone who crossed them. The tension between the gangs had been building for months. There had been several confrontations, fights at neutral locations, spray-painted threats on each other's territory, and even a few Drive-by shootings. The police seemed either unable or unwilling to stop the escalating violence. Snake often talked about the need to send a message to the Royal Guards. "They think they can push us around because we're younger," he would say during their late night meetings. "But they're going to learn that the Crimson Wolves aren't afraid of anyone." Marcus absorbed these lessons about loyalty, respect, and the need to defend their territory. He began to see the world in terms of us versus them, with the Royal Guards representing everything that threatened his new family. The older gang members praised his dedication and began talking about giving him more important responsibilities. The night that would change everything started like many others. Marcus was at the warehouse, playing cards with 3 other gang members and listening to music. The mood was relaxed, almost peaceful. Snake was telling stories about his childhood, making everyone laugh with his impressions of their old teachers. But then Tony Blade Martinez burst through the door, his face flushed with anger. Tony was one of the gang's enforcers, known for his quick temper and quicker fists. He had been out collecting money from local businesses that paid the Crimson Wolves for protection. "Those Royal Guard punks jumped me on 5th Street, Tony announced, his voice shaking with rage. 3 of them. Including that big guy they called Tower? They said we had 24 hours to stay out of their territory or face the consequences." The room fell silent. Everyone knew that 5th Street had always been neutral ground, a place where different gangs could conduct business without fear of violence. If the Royal Guards were claiming it as their territory, it was a direct challenge that couldn't be ignored. Snake stood up slowly, his jaw clenched. "Did they hurt you?" Tony shook his head. "They just pushed me around and took the money I collected. But they made it clear this was a warning, said next time would be different." Marcus watched as Snake paced around the room, his mind clearly working through their options. The other gang members waited quietly, knowing that whatever decision Snake made would determine their next move. Finally, Snake stopped pacing and looked around the room. His eyes settled on Marcus. "It's time you proved yourself, little brother. You ready to show these Royal Guards that nobody disrespects the Crimson Wolves?" The planned Marcus felt his heart race as all eyes in the room turned to him. This was the moment he had been both anticipating and dreading since joining the Crimson Wolves. He knew that proving himself meant crossing a line he could never uncross. But backing down wasn't an option. In the gang world, respect was everything, and cowardice was a death sentence. "I'm ready," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth, as if someone else was speaking. Snake smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. "That's what I wanted to hear. But this isn't going to be some random street fight. We need to send a message that the Royal Guards will never forget." Over the next hour, Snake outlined his plan. The Royal Guards had a regular patrol route through downtown, always traveling in pairs for safety. According to their sources, tomorrow evening, 2 of their members would be walking through Riverside Park around 8 o'clock. The park was relatively isolated after dark, with plenty of trees and shadows to provide cover. "We're not looking to start a war," Snake explained to the gathered gang members. "We just need to show them that we can reach them anywhere, anytime. Marcus, you'll approach them alone. They'll think you're just some kid walking through the park. When you get close, you make your move." Tony leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "What kind of move are we talking about?" Snake reached under an old couch and pulled out a knife. The blade was about 6 inches long, with a black handle wrapped in electrical tape. It looked deadly and efficient. Nothing too serious. Just enough to scare them and maybe leave a small reminder of who they're dealing with. Marcus stared at the knife, feeling his mouth go dry. He had carried weapons before, but always as backup for other gang members. This would be the first time he was expected to actually use one. The weight of what Snake was asking hit him like a physical blow. "What if something goes wrong?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing will go wrong," Snake assured him. "You walk up, flash the blade, make your point, and walk away. They'll be so surprised they won't know what hit them. By the time they recover, you'll be long gone." The other gang members nodded their agreement, but Marcus could see doubt in some of their eyes. This plan seemed too simple, too easy. Snake was the leader, and questioning him wasn't an option. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on the old mattress in the corner of the warehouse, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what he was about to do. 6 months ago, he had been worried about passing his chemistry test and asking Sarah Mitchell to the school dance. Now he was planning to attack strangers with a knife. He thought about his mother, wondering what she would say if she could see him now. She had always taught him to solve problems with words, not violence. Violence is what people use when they're not smart enough to find a better way, she used to say. But his mother had never lived on the streets. She had never been hungry, cold, and alone with nowhere to turn. The next day passed slowly. Marcus went through the motions of normal gang life, playing cards, listening to music, joking with the other members, but his mind was elsewhere. Snake had given him the knife that morning, and Marcus could feel its weight in his jacket pocket like a constant reminder of what was coming. As evening approached, Snake pulled Marcus aside for a final briefing. Remember, confidence is everything. These royal guards think they're tough, but they're not expecting a kid to come at them. Use that to your advantage. What if they fight back? Marcus asked. They won't have time, Snake replied. You get in, make your point, and get out. Quick and clean. At 7:30, Marcus left the warehouse and began walking toward Riverside Park. The autumn air was crisp, and the streets were busy with people heading home from work or going out for dinner. Marcus tried to blend in with the crowd, but he felt like everyone could see the knife in his pocket. Riverside Park was a long, narrow strip of green space that ran along the river. During the day, it was popular with joggers, dog walkers, and families. But after dark, it became a different place. The streetlights were spaced far apart, creating pockets of darkness between pools of yellow light. The sound of the river mast, other noises, making it perfect for activities people didn't want witnesses to see. Marcus found a bench about 50 yards from the main walking path and sat down to wait. From here, he could see anyone approaching from either direction. His hands were shaking, so he shoved them deep into his pockets, feeling the smooth handle of the knife against his palm. At exactly 8 o'clock, Marcus saw 2 figures walking along the path from the north entrance. Even in the dim light, he could make out the blue bandanas that marked them as royal guards. One was tall and thin, moving with the easy confidence of someone who owned the streets. The other was shorter, but broader, with the muscled build of someone who spent time in the gym. Marcus waited until they were about 20 feet past his bench, then stood up and began following them. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure they would hear it, but the 2 gang members continued their conversation without looking back. The path curved around a cluster of large oak trees, creating a natural blind spot where no one from the street could see what happened. This was the perfect place to make his move. Marcus quickened his pace, closing the distance between himself and the 2 royal guards. "Excuse me," he called out, trying to sound casual. Both men turned around and Marcus got his first good look at their faces. The tall one had sharp features and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The shorter one had a scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, giving him a permanent half-smile that wasn't friendly at all. "Yeah," the tall one said, his voice neutral but wary. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out the knife, holding it in front of him with both hands. The blade caught the light from a nearby street lamp, gleaming like a promise of violence. "This is a message from the Crimson Wolves," Marcus said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Stay out of our territory, or next time won't be just a warning." For a moment, nobody moved. The 2 royal guards stared at Marcus, then at the knife, then back at Marcus. The shorter one's hand moved slowly toward his waistband, while the tall one held up a hand to stop him. Then the tall one did something Marcus hadn't expected. He laughed. "Kid," he said, shaking his head, "you have no idea what you just walked into, do you?" Before Marcus could ask what he meant, both men reached into their jackets and pulled out identification badges. In the dim light, Marcus could barely make out the words, but the official-looking seals were unmistakable. "Detective Rodriguez, Metro Police Gang Task Force," the tall one said calmly. "And this is Detective Johnson." We're undercover officers investigating gang activity in this area. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The knife suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his hands. And you, Detective Rodriguez continued, just committed assault with a deadly weapon against 2 police officers. The world seemed to stop moving around Marcus. The knife in his hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and his legs threatened to give out beneath him. Everything Snake had told him about the Royal Guards, everything he thought he knew about the situation, crumbled in an instant. "Officers," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "But you're wearing bandanas. You're Royal Guards." Right. Detective Johnson, the shorter one with the scar, stepped closer. His hand remained near his weapon, but he moved slowly, like someone approaching a frightened animal. "The bandanas are part of our cover, son. We've been working undercover for 6 months, trying to identify the leadership structure of both gangs." "We know who you are, Marcus Thompson," Detective Rodriguez added, his voice gentler now. 18 years old, mother died 8 months ago, been living on the streets since then. You've been running with the Crimson Wolves for about 4 months. Marcus stared at them in shock. How could they know so much about him? His grip on the knife loosened, and for a moment he considered dropping it and running. But where would he go? The warehouse wasn't safe anymore, and he had nowhere else. "How do you know my name?" he asked. "'Cause we've been watching," Detective Rodriguez explained. "Not just you, but all the gang members. We know about Snake Rodriguez, no relation to me, by the way, and his recruitment methods. We know about the warehouse on Maple Street, the protection racket on 5th Street, and the drug distribution network they're building." Detective Johnson circled around to Marcus's side, staying just out of reach of the knife. "What we don't know is how deep you're in, kid. Are you just another street recruit, or are you involved in the serious crimes?" Marcus's mind was racing. If these were really police officers, then everything he had been told was a lie. The Royal Guards weren't a rival gang, they were undercover cops. The attacks Tony had described, the territorial disputes, the need for revenge, it was all based on a misunderstanding. "I don't understand," Marcus said, lowering the knife slightly. "If you're cops, then why didn't you arrest us before now?" "Because small-time street dealers and petty criminals aren't our target," Detective Rodriguez explained. "We're after the people who supply the drugs, who order the violence, who profit from keeping kids like you trapped in this life. We need evidence of serious crimes before we can make arrests that will stick." "But Snake said you attacked Tony. He said you took money from him and threatened the gang." Detective Johnson shook his head. "As Tony Martinez was selling drugs to middle school students outside Lincoln Elementary. We confiscated his drugs and the money he made from those sales. We told him to stay away from that school or we'd arrest him. No threats against the gang, just a warning to stop dealing to children." The pieces were starting to fall into place in Marcus's mind. Snake had twisted the truth, turning a justified police action into an attack on their territory. He had used Marcus's loyalty and trust to manipulate him into this situation. "Snake lied to me," Marcus said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Snake is a recruiter," Detective Rodriguez explained. "His job is to find vulnerable kids and turn them into soldiers for the gang. He targets runaways, kids aging out of foster care, teenagers whose families can't or won't help them. He offers them exactly what they need most: food, shelter, and a sense of belonging." But why did he send me here? What was he really trying to accomplish? Detective Johnson exchanged a glance with his partner. "We think Snake suspected we might be undercover officers. Sending a new recruit to attack us would accomplish 2 things. If we were really gang members, you'd prove your loyalty by attacking. Rivals, if we were cops, we'd have to blow our cover to arrest you. Either way, Snake wins," Detective Rodriguez added. "If we arrested you, he'd know we were police, and he could relocate the gang's operations. If we didn't arrest you, he'd assume we were just rival gang members, and he could escalate the conflict to draw us into a larger confrontation." Marcus felt sick. He had been nothing more than a pawn in Snake's game, a disposable piece to be sacrificed for information. All the talk about family and loyalty had been manipulation. It's designed to make him willing to risk his freedom and his life for people who saw him as expendable. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, though he was afraid. To hear the answer, it depends on you, Detective Rodriguez said. You're holding a weapon and you threaten to police officers. Technically, we could arrest you right now for assault with a deadly weapon, making terrorist threats, and gang affiliation. You'd be looking at several years in juvenile detention, followed by adult prison when you turn 18. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to process what he was hearing. After everything he had been through, losing his mother, becoming homeless, joining the gang, he was going to end up in prison anyway. But Detective Johnson continued, "We don't think you're a real criminal. We think you're a victim who made some bad choices because you didn't have good options." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the two officers. "What do you mean?" "You mean you have a choice to make right now," Detective Rodriguez explained. "You can drop that knife, walk away from the Crimson Wolves, and help us build a case against the people who are really responsible for the problems in this neighborhood. Or you can stay loyal to Snake and his crew, and we'll treat you like the criminal you're choosing to become. If I help you, what happens to me? If you help us, we can offer you protection, a chance to get your life back on track, and an opportunity to make sure other kids don't end up in the same situation you're in now." Marcus looked down at the knife in his hands. 6 months ago, he never could have imagined holding a weapon and threatening someone with it. The scared, homeless teenager who had been digging through garbage seemed like a different person entirely. But maybe it wasn't too late to find that person again. "What would I have to do?" he asked quietly. Detective Johnson stepped closer, his voice becoming more urgent. "The most important thing is keeping you safe. Snake suspects you're working with us. He won't hesitate to hurt you. These gangs don't tolerate betrayal. We'd need information about the gang's operations," Detective Rodriguez added. "Who's in charge? Where they get their drugs? How they recruit new members? What crimes they're planning? It's the kind of intelligence that can only come from someone." On the inside, Marcus thought about the other young gang members back at the warehouse. Kids like Tommy Chen, who was only 16, and had been living on the streets since his parents kicked him out for failing school. Or Maria Santos, who joined the gang after aging out of foster care with nowhere else to go. They were all just trying to survive like he had been. If I help you arrest the gang leaders, what happens to the other kids? The younger members. The ones who haven't committed serious crimes would likely face juvenile court, Detective Rodriguez explained. But instead of just punishment, they'd be connected with social services, job training programs, and housing assistance. The goal is to give them the help they should have received before they ended up on the streets. For the first time since his mother died, Marcus felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a way out of this life after all, but he could help make. Sure, other kids didn't have to make the same desperate choices he had made. Slowly, Marcus lowered the knife and set it on the ground. "I'll help you," he said. "But I need to know that I can trust you." Detective Rodriguez smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. "Son, you just made the smartest decision of your life. Now let's talk about how we're going to keep you alive long enough to make it count." The next few weeks were the most challenging of Marcus's life. Returning to the warehouse after his encounter with the undercover officers felt like walking into a different world. Everything looked the same. The graffiti-covered walls, the stolen electronics, the makeshift furniture, but Marcus saw it all through new eyes. What had once seemed like a refuge now felt like a trap. Snake was waiting for him when he arrived back at the warehouse, along with several other gang members. Their faces were eager, expecting to hear about Marcus's successful mission against the Royal Guards. "So how'd it go, little brother?" Snake asked, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "Did you deliver our message?" Marcus had spent the entire walk back rehearsing his story. Detective Rodriguez had coached him on what to say, how to act, and what details to include to make his account believable. The key was to tell a version of the truth that would satisfy Snake without revealing what had really happened. "I found them in the park, just like you said," Marcus began, trying to keep his voice steady. "Two of them, wearing their blue bandanas, walking along the river path." And Tony prompted, leaning forward eagerly. I approached them with the knife, told them to stay out of Crimson Wolves territory. They were surprised, didn't expect some kid to come at them like that." Snake smiled approvingly. "What did they say?" Marcus took a deep breath. "They said they'd think about it. Tried to act tough, but I could see they were rattled. One of them reached for something. Might have been a weapon, but I was already backing away. "That's my boy," Snake said proudly. "You did good, Marcus. The Royal Guards know. We're not afraid of them now." The other gang members gathered around, patting Marcus on the back and congratulating him on his successful mission. Their praise made him feel sick, knowing that their respect was based on a lie. But Detective Rodriguez had been clear. Maintaining his cover was essential for both the investigation and his own safety. Over the following days, Marcus began his double life as an informant. During the day, he participated in gang activities, attended meetings, and maintained his relationships with other members. But in the evenings, he would slip away to meet with Detective Rodriguez at predetermined locations throughout the city. Their first official meeting took place in an abandoned parking lot behind a closed shopping mall. Detective Rodriguez arrived, alone, dressed in civilian clothes to avoid attracting attention. He had brought a small digital recorder and a notebook filled with questions. "How many active members does the Crimson Wolves have?" was his first question. Marcus thought carefully. Before answering, "About 15 regular members, but Snake is always recruiting. There's usually 2 or 3 new kids hanging around at any given time." "What about weapons? They keep them hidden around the warehouse?" "I've seen handguns, knives, and some kind of automatic rifle that Tony brought back from somewhere. Snake doesn't let the newer members handle the guns." Detective Rodriguez made notes as Marcus talked, occasionally asking follow-up questions or requesting clarification. The process felt strange to Marcus. He was betraying people who had become his family, even if that family was built on lies and manipulation. "Tell me about the drug operation," Detective Rodriguez requested. This was harder for Marcus to discuss. He had tried to avoid getting involved in the drug trade, but living in the warehouse meant he couldn't help but observe what was happening around him. "Snake gets packages delivered every Tuesday night," Marcus explained. "Oh, usually from a guy in a black sedan who never gets out of the car. Snake divides up whatever's in the packages and gives portions to different members for street sales." "Do you know where these packages come from originally?" Marcus shook his head. "Snake handles all of that himself. He doesn't talk about suppliers or sources, but I've heard him on the phone sometimes. He's talking to someone he calls boss. It sounds like Snake takes orders from someone higher up." This information clearly interested Detective Rodriguez. He made several notes and asked Marcus to pay closer attention to Snake's phone conversations in the future. "What about violence?" the detective asked. "Have you witnessed any assaults, robberies, or other serious crimes?" Marcus hesitated. This question forced him to confront aspects of gang life he had tried to ignore. There had been some fights with other gangs, mostly over territory. Cantoni collects protection money from local businesses. If someone refuses to pay, he usually comes back with backup, and things get ugly. "Have you participated in any of these activities?" "Not directly," Marcus said. "But I've been a lookout during some of the collections. And I helped carry supplies when they were planning to retaliate against a rival gang for tagging our territory." Detective Rodriguez studied Marcus carefully. "I need you to understand something important. As an informant, you're not expected to participate in serious crimes. Snake asks you to hurt someone or commit a felony. You need to find a way to avoid it without blowing your cover." "How am I supposed to do that? Get sick? Have a family emergency? Create a distraction?" There are ways to avoid participating without making it obvious you're refusing. But if you're ever in a situation where you have no choice, your safety comes first. It's better to blow your cover than end up seriously hurting someone or getting seriously hurt yourself. As the weeks passed, Marcus became more skilled at gathering information without arousing suspicion. He learned to listen carefully to conversations, remember important details, and ask casual questions that didn't seem like interrogation. The other gang members began to trust him more, including him in discussions about future plans and operations. The breakthrough came during a late-night meeting at the warehouse. Snake had called together all the senior members to discuss what he called expanding our business model. Marcus sat in the back of the room, trying to look interested while memorizing every word. "We've been small-time for too long," Snake announced. Selling dime bags on street corners and collecting protection money from corner stores isn't going to make us rich. It's time to move up to the next level. Tony raised his hand. What did you have in mind? The boss has offered us a bigger piece of the distribution network, Snake explained. Instead of just selling on our own territory, we'd be supplying product to 3 other gangs across the city. It's more risk, but also more money than we've ever seen. Felt his heart racing. This was exactly the kind of information Detective Rodriguez was looking for, evidence of a larger criminal organization that Snake and his gang were part of. What's the catch? Asked Carmen Rodriguez, one of the few female gang members and Snake's girlfriend. We need to prove we can handle the responsibility, Snake replied. The boss wants to see that we're serious about business, that we can move product efficiently and deal with problems professionally. Someone asked from the back of the room. Snake's expression grew serious. Competition. There are other gangs who want this opportunity, and some of them have been in the game longer than us. We need to show that we're willing to eliminate obstacles to our success. Marcus understood what Snake was really saying. We're being asked to engage in violence against rival gangs to prove their worthiness for a bigger role in the drug trade. This was the kind of escalation that Detective Rodriguez had warned him about. After the meeting, Marcus waited until most of the gang members had left before approaching Snake privately. Can I ask you something, sure, little brother? What's on your mind? This opportunity with the boss, are you sure we're ready for it? I mean, we've been doing well with our current setup. Snake studied Marcus carefully, and for a moment, Marcus worried that he had said something wrong. But then Snake smiled and put his arm around Marcus's shoulders. You're smart to be cautious, Snake said. That's why I trust you. But sometimes you have to take risks to move up in this world. The boss didn't get where he is by playing it safe. Who is the boss exactly? Marcus asked, trying to sound casual. Snake's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. That's not something you need to worry about right now. Focus on doing your job well, and when you're ready for more responsibility, I'll tell you what you need to know. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about what he had learned. The gang was planning to escalate their activities significantly, which meant more violence, more drugs, and more young people being drawn into criminal activity. But he also sensed that Snake was beginning to trust him with more sensitive information. His next meeting with Detective Rodriguez couldn't come soon enough. Marcus had gathered the most important intelligence of his informant career, and he hoped it would be enough to start bringing down the larger criminal organization that was destroying his neighborhood. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a tightrope between 2 different worlds, and one false step could send him falling into a pit he might never escape from. The meeting with Detective Rodriguez took place in an empty church basement 3 days later. The detective brought his partner, Detective Johnson, and both men looked more serious than Marcus had ever seen them. Learned about the boss and the gang's expansion plans, their expressions grew even grimmer. This is bigger than we thought, Detective Rodriguez said, pacing around the small room. We suspected the Crimson Wolves were part of a larger network, but if Snake is telling the truth about supplying 3 other gangs, we're looking at a major distribution operation. Detective Johnson leaned forward in his chair. Marcus, you said Snake mentioned proving themselves by eliminating obstacles. Did he give any specifics about what that means? Not exactly, Marcus replied. But based on how he's talked before, I think it means they're planning to attack rival gangs, or maybe target businesses that won't cooperate with their protection racket. We need more details, Detective Rodriguez stated. Names, dates, locations, anything that will help us prevent violence and build a case against the people running this operation. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. I'll try to find out more, but Snake is being careful about what he shares. I think he's starting to suspect that someone might be listening. Has he said anything that makes you think he suspects you specifically? Marcus thought back over recent conversations. Not directly, but he's been asking more questions about where I go when I leave the warehouse. Yesterday, he mentioned that loyalty is the most important quality in gang life. That betrayal is the worst sin someone can commit. The 2 detectives exchanged worried glances. Detective Johnson spoke first. Maybe it's time to consider pulling you out. We've got enough information to make some arrests. But if we move too soon, we'll only get the street-level dealers, Detective Rodriguez argued. The boss and the people running the supply chain will disappear. 6 months from now, there will be a new gang in that warehouse doing the same things. Marcus listened to their debate, understanding that his life hung in the balance of their decision. If they pulled him out now, he would be safe, but the larger criminal organization would continue operating. If he stayed undercover, he might be able to help them solve a bigger problem, but the risks were increasing every day. I want to stay, Marcus said quietly. Both detectives stopped talking and looked at him. I know it's dangerous, but think about all the kids who will end up like me if we don't stop this thing at its source. Detective Rodriguez studied Marcus carefully. Are you sure? Yeah, because once we commit to this path, there's no guarantee we can protect you if things go wrong. I'm sure, Marcus replied, though his voice trembled slightly. These people took advantage of me when I was vulnerable. They're doing the same thing to other kids right now. If I can help stop that, then the risk is worth it. Detective Johnson nodded slowly. All right, but we need to establish better safety protocols. From now on, you check in with us every other day, even if it's just a quick phone call to let us know you're okay. Over the next week, Marcus threw himself deeper into gang activities than ever before. He volunteered for more responsibilities, stayed late for meetings, and made himself indispensable to Snake's operations. The strategy worked. Snake began including him in more sensitive discussions and trusting him with increasingly important tasks. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night. Snake had received a phone call that clearly agitated him, and afterward he called an emergency meeting of the senior gang members. Marcus positioned himself where he could hear everything while appearing to focus on cleaning weapons. The boss is not happy, Snake announced to the assembled group. Apparently, there have been some problems with our competition, and he thinks we're not moving fast enough to secure our territory. Tony shifted uncomfortably. What kind of problems? Iron Serpents have been undercutting our prices on the south side, Snake explained. They're selling the same product for 20% less. And some of our regular customers have started buying from them instead. Carmen raised her hand. So what does the boss want us to do about it? Snake's expression grew cold. He wants us to send a message that will make other gangs think twice about competing with us. Something permanent. The room fell silent as everyone understood what Snake was suggesting. Marcus felt his stomach clench as he realized they were talking about seriously hurting or even killing members of the rival gang. When? Tony asked, his voice eager. This weekend? The Iron Serpents have a regular pickup on Saturday nights at the old steel mill on Industrial Avenue. 3 of their dealers meet there to collect product and divide it up for street sales. The boss wants us to intercept that meeting. Marcus continued cleaning the pistol in his hands, but his mind was racing. This was the specific information Detective Rodriguez needed: names, locations, dates, and plans for serious violence. But it was also exactly the kind of situation the detective had warned him about. Who's going? I'm asked. Around the room, his eyes settling on each gang member in turn. Tony, Carmen, and Marcus. 3 of them. 3 of us. Fair fight. Marcus's blood ran cold. Snake wasn't just planning violence against rival gang members. He was expecting Marcus to participate directly. There would be no way to avoid this without blowing his cover. Marcus hasn't been in a real fight yet, Tony pointed out. Maybe someone with more experience should go instead. That's exactly why he needs to go, Snake replied firmly. It's time for our little brother to prove he's ready for the next level. Besides, the boss specifically asked about our newer recruits. He wants to know if we're developing reliable soldiers. After the meeting, Marcus waited until he could slip away from the warehouse without being noticed. He used a payphone 6 blocks away to call Detective Rodriguez's emergency number, his hand shaking as he dialed. We have a problem, Marcus said when the detective answered. They're planning something for Saturday night, and they want me to be part of it. Where can you meet? The old library on Elm Street. 20 minutes. Detective Rodriguez was already waiting when Marcus arrived. Along with Detective Johnson, and two other officers Marcus didn't recognize. They sat in the reference section, surrounded by dusty books that clearly hadn't been touched in years. "Tell us everything," Detective Rodriguez said without preamble. Marcus recounted the entire meeting, providing every detail he could remember about the planned attack on the Iron Serpents. The officers took notes and asked clarifying questions, building a complete picture of what the Crimson Wolves intended to do. "We can't let this happen," Detective Johnson stated. "If 3 gang members get seriously injured or killed, it will trigger a war between these groups that could spread throughout the city." One of the other officers, who had introduced herself as Sergeant Martinez, leaned forward. "What if we arrest Marcus before Saturday? Make it look like he got picked up on an unrelated charge. Snake would be suspicious." Detective Rodriguez replied. "Marcus disappearing right before a major operation would raise too many questions." "What if I just don't show up?" Marcus suggested. "Tell them I got sick or had an emergency." "That might work once, but Snake is already testing your loyalty," Detective Johnson observed. "If you back out of something this important, he'll know you're not committed to the gang." Sergeant Martinez studied Marcus carefully. "There is another option, but it's risky. We could let you go to the meeting, but have officers in position to intervene before any violence occurs." "You mean arrest?" "Everyone?" Marcus asked. "Exactly. We arrest all 6 gang members, the 3 Crimson Wolves and the 3 Iron Serpents. From the outside, it would look like bad luck, or maybe an informant in one of the other gangs. Your cover would remain intact." Detective Rodriguez shook his head. "Too many variables. What if someone gets hurt before we can intervene? What if one of the gang members decides to fight instead of surrendering? What if we warn the Iron Serpents?" Marcus suggested. "Tell them not to show up for their meeting. Then the Crimson Wolves would know someone leaked information about their plans." Sergeant Martinez pointed out. "Snake would start looking for the source and you'd be in immediate danger." The 4 officers continued debating different approaches, but Marcus could see that none of the options were good. Every plan involved significant risks, either to his safety, to the investigation, or to innocent people who might get caught in gang violence. Finally, Detective Rodriguez made a decision. "We're pulling you out. Tonight, we'll stage an arrest. Make it look like you got picked up for something unrelated to gang activity. Once you're safely in custody, we'll move against the warehouse and round up as many gang members as we can." "But what about the boss?" Marcus protested. "If you don't catch the people at the top, this will all happen again with a different gang." "We'll keep working on that," Sergeant Martinez assured him. "But not at the cost of your life. You've done enough." As they finalized the details of Marcus's extraction, he felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that he would soon be free from the constant fear and moral compromises of undercover work. Disappointment that they hadn't been able to completely dismantle the criminal network that was destroying his neighborhood. But as Detective Rodriguez drove him back toward the warehouse for one final appearance, Marcus realized that his work as an informant had accomplished something important. The information he had gathered would put Snake and several other gang leaders in prison, disrupting their operations and preventing the planned violence against the Iron Serpents. More importantly, his decision to cooperate with law enforcement had given him something he had lost months ago, a sense of purpose, and the knowledge that his actions were making a positive difference in the world. Tomorrow, Marcus Thompson would begin a new chapter of his life. Tonight, he had to survive one last performance as a member of the Crimson Wolves. The arrest happened at exactly 2:47 a.m. on Friday morning. Marcus was walking back to the warehouse after buying cigarettes from a late-night convenience store when 2 patrol cars pulled up beside him. The timing was perfect, late enough that most gang members would be asleep, but not so late that his absence would be noticed before morning. "Marcus Thompson?" one of the officers called out, stepping from his vehicle with practiced authority. "Yeah, what do you want?" Marcus replied, playing his role as a defiant gang member. "You're under arrest for violation of probation." The officer moved forward with handcuffs while his partner maintained a safe distance with his hand near his weapon. Marcus made a show of resistance, arguing loudly about his innocence and demanding to know what probation violation they were talking about. The performance was for the benefit of anyone who might be watching from nearby windows or doorways. In gang neighborhoods, arrests were public theater, and his reaction had to be believable. As the patrol car pulled away from the curb, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of relief. After months of living in constant fear, maintaining lies, and witnessing criminal activity, he was finally safe. The undercover operation was over. Detective Rodriguez was waiting at the police station when they brought Marcus in. The booking process was handled quietly, with minimal paperwork and no mugshot. Within an hour, Marcus found himself in a secure conference room, drinking coffee and eating a sandwich while the detective explained what would happen next. The raid start at dawn, Detective Rodriguez informed him. We have warrants for the warehouse, 3 other locations where gang members live, and 2 businesses we know are involved in money laundering. What about Snake? He'll be charged with drug trafficking, conspiracy, and several other felonies. Based on his prior record, he's looking at 15 to 20 years in prison. Marcus nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Snake had manipulated him and put him in danger, but he had also been the first person to offer help when Marcus was desperate and alone. The relationship had been built on lies, but the kindness Snake had shown in those early days had been real. Enough to save Marcus's life. What happens to me now? Marcus asked. Detective Rodriguez smiled. That's the good news. The district attorney's office has agreed to immunity in exchange for your cooperation. You won't face any charges related to your gang activities. More importantly, we've arranged for you to enter a witness protection program designed specifically for former gang members. Over the next several hours, Detective Rodriguez explained the program in detail. Marcus would receive a new identity, complete with social security card, birth certificate, and school records. He would be relocated to a different city, where he could finish high school and apply for college, with the help of counselors who specialized in helping at-risk youth. You'll have a monthly stipend for living expenses, plus access to job training and educational support, the detective explained. The only requirements are that you stay out of trouble, maintain regular contact with your caseworker, and be available to testify if any of these cases go to trial. Where would I go? It depends on what you want to do with your life. We have partnerships with programs in different states. Some focus on academic preparation for college, others emphasize job training and immediate employment. What interests? Marcus thought about the question for a long time. 6 months ago, his biggest worry had been passing his chemistry test. Now he was being offered a chance to completely restart his life, to become whoever he wanted to be. I want to go to college, he said finally. I want to study criminal justice, maybe become a police officer or work with kids who are in situations like I was. That's a good choice, Detective Rodriguez replied. We have an excellent program in Colorado that works with the state university system. You'd finish high school through their accelerated program, then start college with full financial support. 3 days later, Marcus was on a bus to Denver, carrying a single duffel bag and a folder containing his new identity documents. His new name was Michael Torres, and according to his backstory, he was a transfer student from California whose family had moved to Colorado for his father's job. The program was better than Marcus had dared to hope. He lived in a supervised group home with 4 other young men who were also rebuilding their lives after difficult circumstances. The house parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, were former social workers who understood the challenges their residents faced and provided support. Without judgment, Marcus, now Michael, threw himself into his studies with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. He had always been a decent student, but his motivation now came from a deeper place. Every lesson about government, law enforcement, and social services connected to his personal experience in ways that made the material come alive. His favorite class was Criminal Justice Ethics, taught by Professor Williams, a former police officer who had transitioned to academia after 20 years on the force. When they studied the use of informants in law enforcement, Michael found himself contributing to discussions with insights that impressed both the professor and his classmates. The ethics of using civilian informants is complicated, Professor, Williams explained during one lecture. On one hand, it's an essential tool for investigating crimes that occur in closed communities. On the other hand, it places ordinary people in potentially dangerous situations. Michael raised his hand. What about when the informant volunteers? Oh, when there's someone who was already involved in criminal activity and chooses to help law enforcement? That's a good question, Michael. What do you think about that situation? I think it depends on the motivation, Michael replied carefully. If someone is cooperating just to get a lighter sentence, they might be willing to say whatever they think police want to hear. But if they're genuinely trying to right a wrong or prevent harm to others, that seems more ethical to both sides. Professor Williams nodded approvingly. You're touching on one of the key issues in this field, the difference between cooperation. Based on self-interest versus cooperation, based on moral conviction? After class, Professor Williams asked Michael to stay behind. You seem to have some strong opinions about law enforcement practices. Have you given any thought to what you'd like to do after graduation? I'm thinking about becoming a police officer, Michael replied. Maybe working with gang prevention or youth outreach programs. With your insights and communication skills, you'd be excellent at that kind of work. Have you considered going on to graduate school? A master's degree in criminal justice or social work would open up even more opportunities. Michael hadn't considered graduate school, but the suggestion intrigued him. Over the following weeks, he researched different programs and began to envision a career that combined law enforcement with social services, helping at-risk youth before they made the kinds of mistakes he had made. 2 years later, Michael Torres graduated summa cum laude with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Detective Rodriguez, who had kept in touch throughout his education, attended the graduation ceremony along with Mr. and Mrs. Chen and several other program administrators. You should be proud, Detective Rodriguez told him after the ceremony. The information you provided led to convictions for 12 gang members and helped us identify the regional distribution network they were part of. More importantly, the Crimson Wolves disbanded after Snake's arrest. And we haven't seen that level of organized gang activity in your old neighborhood since then. What about the other kids who were in the gang? Michael asked. Most of them ended up in programs similar to yours. A few went to juvenile detention, but they're getting help with education and job training. None of them stayed in gang life. That fall, Michael started graduate school at the University of Colorado, studying social work with a specialization in adolescent intervention programs. His thesis research focused on developing early identification systems for youth at risk of gang recruitment. During his second year of graduate school, Michael began volunteering with a local organization that worked with homeless teenagers. Drawing on his own experiences, he was able to connect with kids who had given up on trusting adults. His success rate at getting young people into stable housing and educational programs was remarkable. You have a gift for this work, his supervisor, Janet Morrison, told him during a performance review. These kids respond to you in ways I've never seen. It's like you speak their language. Michael smiled. Guess I understand where they're coming from. One evening, while working a shift at the homeless shelter, Michael encountered a 16-year-old named David, who reminded him strongly of himself at that age. David had been living on the streets for 3 months after aging out of foster care. He was suspicious of authority figures and resistant to offers of help, convinced that everyone had an ulterior motive. I don't need anything from you, David said when Michael approached him in the shelter's common room. Just leave me alone. I'm not here to sell you anything or make you do anything, Michael replied, sitting down nearby, but not too close. I'm just here if you want to talk. About what? Whatever you want. Or nothing at all. Sometimes it's just nice to have someone sit nearby who isn't going to hassle you. David studied Michael suspiciously. You're not like the other social workers. They're always pushing forms at me, wanting me to go to meetings and sign up for programs. Programs can be helpful, but they're not for everyone. At least not right away, Michael said. When I was your age, I was sleeping in abandoned buildings and eating from dumpsters. The last thing I wanted was someone telling me how to live my life. When you were my age, David looked skeptical. How long ago was that? About 6 years? I lived on the streets for almost 8 months before I got help. For the first time since Michael had approached him, David seemed genuinely interested. What kind of help? A kind that didn't require me to change who I was or pretend to? Be grateful. It's basic support while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. Over the following weeks, Michael continued talking with David during his shifts at the shelter. He didn't push, didn't make demands, and didn't promise easy solutions. Instead, he listened to David's story, shared appropriate parts of his own experience, and gradually built the trust necessary for David to accept help. When David finally agreed to enter a transitional housing program, Michael felt a familiar sense of satisfaction, the same feeling he had experienced when he decided to cooperate with Detective Rodriguez years earlier. He was using his past experiences to make a positive difference in someone else's life. 3 years later, Michael Torres graduated with his Master of Social Work degree and accepted a position with the Denver Police Department as a community outreach specialist. His job was to work with at-risk youth, connecting them with services and alternatives before they became involved in criminal activity. On his first day of work, Michael stood in front of a group of teenagers who had been arrested for minor offenses, vandalism, truancy, shoplifting. They looked at him with the same suspicious, defiant expressions he remembered wearing at their age. "I'm not here to lecture you or tell you how to live your lives," Michael began. "I'm here because I made some of the same mistakes you're making now, and I learned some things along the way that might be useful." One of the teenagers, a girl who couldn't have been more than 15, raised her hand. "What kind of mistakes?" Michael smiled. "Kind that seemed like good ideas at the time, but turned out to be choices that made my life harder instead of easier." Anyone here ever felt like they had to choose between bad options and worse options? Several hands went up around the room. "That's where I was 6 years ago," Michael continued. "Living on the streets, hungry most of the time, and convinced that the only people who cared about me were people who wanted to use me. I ended up in a gang, carrying weapons, and planning to attack people I'd never met." The room was completely quiet now, with all the teenagers focused on his words. "But I learned something important. There are always more options than you can see when you're scared, angry, or desperate. Sometimes you need help to see those options, and sometimes you have to be willing to trust people you don't know yet." After the session, several of the teenagers approached Michael individually to ask questions or share their own stories. By the end of his first week, he had helped 3 young people connect with housing assistance, job training programs, and educational support. That evening, Michael called Detective Rodriguez to update him on his new job. "It sounds like you found your calling," the detective said. "How does it feel to be on the other side of this kind of work?" Michael thought about the question for a moment. "It feels like everything that happened to me, the homelessness, the gang involvement, even the fear and mistakes, it all had a purpose. I went through those experiences so I could help other kids avoid them or get out of them, you know." "Marcus," Detective Rodriguez said, using Michael's original name for the first time in years. "When we first met in that park, I never imagined you'd end up where you are now. You've turned your life into something remarkable." As Michael hung up the phone, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The scared, desperate teenager who had once threatened police officers with a knife was now a college graduate working to prevent other young people from making similar choices. He thought about Snake, who was serving his sentence in federal prison, and wondered if his former mentor ever regretted the choices that had led him there. He thought about the other Crimson Wolves members, most of whom had rebuilt their lives, with help from programs similar to the ones Michael now supported. Most of all, he thought about the teenagers he would meet tomorrow and next week, and next year, young people who were facing the same desperate circumstances he had faced, who needed someone to believe in their potential for positive change. Michael Torres had learned that sometimes the biggest mistakes in life could become the foundation for the most meaningful work. His story was proof that it was never too late to choose a different path, and that the people best equipped to help others were often those who had walked similar roads themselves.